Hey, YouTube, Pick Six Podcast, me, Ryan Wilson, and John Breech. If you like this sort of content, you can can subscribe, you can hit the old bell notification so you get our alerts, you get the live stuff, and just go ahead and do it. It'll make us feel better. Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, everybody. It's me, Ryan Wilson, joined by John Breech. Will Brinson is MIA, but that's okay. He'll be back tomorrow. We'll just assume that. Johnny Breech, it's draft season, just over 2 weeks into the draft. How excited are you about the prospect of Matt Araiza being a second-round pick, the punter out of South Dakota, out of San Diego State?
I've already got a cake pre-ordered for the event. This is going to be big. I've got some footballs. I'm going to go in my backyard and punt as soon as Araiza gets drafted. And you know what? If he's a first-round pick, I might go out and buy an Araiza jersey.
You know what you ought to do?
Even if he's drafted by the Steelers.
Like they have the baby reveal where you pop the balloon and it's either pink or blue. You should do a Matt Araiza reveal where you punt the football that's a balloon that explodes with the colors of the team that you think should draft him. What a genius idea.
I'm going to plan it right now, Wilson. But why wouldn't... If he doesn't get drafted by that team, then I just wasted a good football.
No, it's a balloon that's painted to look like football.
Have you ever punted a balloon? It hurts.
All right. Maybe the idea was better in my mind than...
No, I liked it. I'm just kidding.
Once I said it out loud, because clearly you, sir, are a moron.
Quickly. You're the draft analyst. I'm on board with any of your draft ideas.
How many kickers and or punters, maybe even long snappers, holders, do you legitimately watch so you have an idea about the draft? Any of them, just so you have an idea once the free agency rolls around, the undrafted guys are signed, or do you just, as it happens, and you look them up?
I mean, the thing is that you just don't have a lot of good kickers. The kickers don't get drafted. It just doesn't happen often anymore. Teams just want to wait till after the draft and then sign them as undrafted free agents. That works out better for the kicker because they can pick their location, and it works out better for the team because, you know, we talk about this with quarterbacks a little bit, where if you draft a quarterback this year in a class that's not great, and that guy, you don't know that he's going to be better than your starter. You know, what if you draft Kenny Pickett near the Panthers and he shows up and he's not better than Sam Darnold? You're like, oh my God, we are back at square one.
We're behind square one.
That problem is even more exacerbated with kickers, except that it doesn't get, you know, the headlines because you're not spending a high draft pick on kickers and you're not giving them $20 million fully guaranteed contracts. So I will be surprised if we have more. I would put the over-under of the amount of kickers drafted at 2.
All right, 2 more questions, special teams questions, as we run everyone off this draft podcast, and then we'll get going. Would you trade Evan McPherson for a second-round pick?
No.
Would you trade Evan McPherson straight up for Justin Tucker?
No.
Ah, that's what I wanted. That's a soundbite. That is going to go viral.
Well, you know, here's the thing: is that Justin Tucker is
35?
the best kicker in the NFL, but he is 32. So,
he's only 32. He's got 8 years left.
And you know what, though, McPherson, we've seen kickers have great rookie years, and then Jason Sanders, the Dolphins, a good example. And then just for whatever reason, it's consistency is the key when you're a kicker in the NFL, and that is why we see kickers change teams so often because they have up and down seasons. Tucker's really the only guy who has not had a down season. They're all up. I mean, your guy, Chris Boswell, one of the most accurate kickers in the NFL ever, had that ugly season, 2017, 2018, where he made like 60% of his kicks.
You know how he got back on track?
How?
Got off social media.
I mean, that will do it. You don't want to deal with death threats after you miss a field goal.
Yeah, I think that does a lot for your mental health.
But yeah, so I don't think anyone would ever spend a second-round pick on a kicker nowadays. You know, there's no Buccaneers out there trading up to draft Roberto Aguayo.
Nice.
But you do know that your kicker is good enough that you wouldn't trade him away for a set. You know, the Ravens, I don't even know if they would trade Justin Tucker away for a first-round pick because once you realize you have that advantage over other teams, like that's a great advantage to have in your back pocket to have a better kicker than 99% of the NFL.
Fair enough. Those are the answers that I was looking for because I'm looking for you to go viral on social media, kicking Twitter. I'm looking forward to that. All right. So actual draft talk. If you like the podcast, please leave a 5-star review. You can leave a question on Apple for our mailbag, and obviously leave a 5-star review on Spotify. If that's where you listen, wherever you listen, leave whatever the highest review you can leave to make us feel better about ourselves. All right. Mock draft talk. Breech did a 3-round mock draft on Monday, and it was pleasantly received by most teams.
I heard Jets fans hated it.
Jets fans, not so much.
I got a couple sources on Jets Twitter. They weren't thrilled.
They were not thrilled, and that's putting it kindly. So I had the Jaguars taking an offensive lineman this time. Usually I have them taking an edge rusher. And then in round 2, I had him taking an edge rusher and George KARLAFTIS out of Purdue, a linebacker, and then a tight end. Any thoughts on the idea of passing on an edge rusher first of all and taking an offensive lineman if you're Doug trying to help out Trevor?
No, I don't think that's everybody thought that, hey, look, the Jags tagged Cam Robinson. They signed one of the top guards in free agency. And so, Brandon Scherf will be good. I'm sure he's been one of the best guards in the NFL for the past few years. But look, that doesn't mean you have an A-plus offensive line. You've got holes to fill. And if you can help your starting quarterback, I think you should do it. I don't have any problem with that. So if the Jacksonville ends up drafting Evan Neal, or you have Iquanu there. Yeah, either one. Either
one. That's right.
I was thinking of Prisco's mock draft. Sorry, Wilson.
Same difference.
But yeah, if you take an offensive lineman there, I don't think that's an issue. I think that you want to get Trevor Lawrence as much help as possible because he's the key. If you're going to be winning Super Bowls, it's going to be because of Trevor Lawrence, not because you took Aiden Hutchinson. He might help, but Trevor Lawrence is the guy who's getting you there. So you need to get him help and then build from there. That's your foundation.
And BMAX has made this point as well. I'm going off the wrong mock draft, so we'll move on quickly to the other thing. I was reading yesterday's mock draft because I had to refresh the rundown. BMAC made this point as well yesterday that you play so much sub packages now that you have Caleb Chase on he drafted in the first round a few years ago. You have Josh Allen he drafted in the first round a few years before that. You're not going to have all 3 edge rushers on the field at the same time if you're a nickel or in dime. So I think that's actually a pretty good point. I love Aiden Hutchinson. I think offensive line makes that team better immediately, and the Jaguars have shown that you can take a bunch of edge rushers and still win 2 football games. So anyway, if you want to see the rest of the 3-round mock draft, that's just a glimpse. Going over to CBSSports.com, and if you're a Jets fan, go over there with the expectation that you're going to be very, very, very angry. All right, here we go. I'm at the right rundown now. Perfect draft fits.
Jets don't want Trayvon Walker. What's the deal?
I think they rather have Kayvon Thibodeau, who goes a pick later, I think, in my latest mock draft. And then what really got him fired up is at number 10, they take Trevor Penning, the offensive lineman out of Northern Iowa FCS program. And I don't like Penning that high. I know some teams like him in the top half of the first round. I would be fine taking a wide receiver there, and I think that would make Jets fans happy. Garrett Wilson.
You're teasing the rest of the podcast. We're going to talk about that.
Oh, sorry. All right, so let's get to the perfect draft fits. That's a nice segue, Breech. All right, so Breech and I have a couple of names here that we think are perfect draft fits. Doesn't necessarily have to be in the first round, but it can be. All right, Breech, so let's start. I'll let you go first. So you give me your first pick. I think we teased it with the wide receiver talk. What do you think?
Yeah, we were just talking about the Jets. I hope the Jets fans are hate listening right now for Wilson and what he did in his mock draft. You know what? I don't have the Jets taking a Wilson pick at 10th overall, not taking an offensive lineman. I have them taking a wide receiver. I think that Garrett Wilson would be a fantastic fit for the Jets. I know we actually got a mailbag question the other day about taking Garrett Wilson at number 4 overall. I do not think the Jets should take a wide receiver with the 4th overall pick. I think you take your biggest need at 4th overall, whether that's, you have them taking Trayvon Walker, whether that's defensive line, edge rusher in the secondary, whatever it is, you pick up your biggest need. You do not take a wide receiver. You have plenty of guys in there. You have Elijah Moore, you have Corey Davis. You don't need to take a receiver with that 4th overall pick. But once you get down to 10th overall, I think that is the spot where you say, all right, let's make this offense better. Let's help out Zach Wilson. Because a lot of these things with quarterbacks and the things you need to know is this your quarterback of the future? Yes, Zach Wilson's only going into his 2nd year, but if you put enough weapons around him, you've got to know if he can play. And I think Garrett Wilson is a good fit there, especially, like I mentioned with Corey Davis and Elijah Moore. And so if you put all these solid weapons around Zach Wilson and he's still only thrown for 2,000 yards, then you're saying, bye, Zach, we don't need you anymore. And, I don't think the experiment would end that quickly, but you need to get a good idea. And you know what? You look at the Bengals. Of course, I have to bring up the Bengals every podcast, but you look what they did. They surrounded Joe Burrow with 3 stud receivers, Jamar Chase. They drafted Jamar Chase, even though they already had Tyler Boyd, even though they already had T. Higgins. So that wasn't something they needed to do. They could have taken an offensive lineman, Pay Sewell's right there. But no, they said, we're going to go with Chase. And look what happened to that offense. It hit the next level. So I think that's what the Jets should do. And I think they would be hoping just to have half the success that the Bengals had.
So you mentioned number 4, probably don't take a wide receiver there. I'm going to look back quickly. Last year, obviously, you mentioned Jamar Chase. He went 5th overall. Then Jalen Waddle went 6th. I think both those picks worked out year one. Devontae Smith went 10, but that's not a top 5-ish pick. 2020, the highest player drafted was a wide receiver. Henry Ruggs went 12th. 2019, it wasn't Hollywood Brandon, go to 25. I'm trying to see some other ones here. 2017, you mentioned this. I think he's on the roster. Corey Davis. He went 5th overall to the Titans. Clearly hasn't worked out as a 5th overall pick. Mike Williams went 7th. He's had a better run in Los Angeles / San Diego. You could argue, obviously, that the quarterback situation may have something to do with that. And then at number 9, what's this guy? John Ross. I never heard of him.
I thought we agreed to never talk about him or bring up his name ever again.
And then 2015, Amari Cooper went 4th overall. I'm still not convinced he was worth the 4th overall pick. He's a really good football player, obviously. Raiders traded him to Dallas. But would you take him 4th overall, even knowing what you know now?
No.
I don't think so. Kevin White, 7. Obviously, you wouldn't do that either. And we'll look at a few more here. Sammy Watkins went 4th overall in the 2014 class, which is absolutely loaded. Odell Beckham, 12th. Brandon Cooks, 20th. Kelvin Benjamin, 28th. Jordan Matthews, 42. Devontae Adams, 53. Allen Robinson, 61. Jarvis Landry, 63. I think the other lesson there is, Breech, that you can probably find guys later in the round or even later in the draft as opposed to a top 5 pick. I think the Bengals didn't get lucky with Jamar Chase. They got lucky that Jamar Chase was there. They didn't roll the dice and just get the guy that they didn't think.
Well, and also the receiver, that was a loaded class last year. I mean,
right.
3 receivers in the top 10, and they were all worth it. You could argue with Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith also. So
yep,
I think,
even Devontae. Yeah, you said Devontae Smith. That's right. Yep.
So you don't want to pull what the other New York team did with Kadarius Toney, who maybe didn't.
He
justify,
might be all right.
Yeah, and he could be. The jury's still out on him. But yeah, I just think that the 4th pick is just too high to take a receiver.
Yeah, I'm with you. By the way, Adi Joseph, managing editor on the editorial side, would trade McPherson for Tucker and a 2nd rounder. Now he's just talking crazy, but that's okay. Come on now. Would you do that?
I would trade McPherson for Tucker and a 2nd. Yes.
That's crazy. No one in there, right? Actually, the Saints might do that, but unfortunately,
you think John Harbaugh is going to call up the Bengals, a division rival, and say, "All right, we want your guy Evan McPherson so badly. We'll give you Justin Tucker, who probably has 6 good years left, and a 2nd round pick, and you give us Evan McPherson."
That's what you do when you're trying to get fired. He's not trying to get fired. He's actually trying to get Lamar to sign his extension or sign an extension. All right, so my perfect draft fit. 2 picks later from number 4, the Panthers on the clock at number 6. You sort of mentioned it earlier. Do you take a quarterback at 6 on a team with virtually no offensive help around him, starting with the offensive line? Obviously, there's Christian McCaffrey there, Robbie Anderson. There's some players, but good Lord, that offensive line is straight up dog doo-doo. If I'm at 6 and there's one of those 3 offensive tackles there, Evan Neal, Ike Ekwonu, Charles Cross, and every single quarterback in every other position available, including Kayvon Thibodeau, Aiden Hutchinson, I'm taking Charles Cross. And it's not even close. We just talked about the Jaguars. You can take all the edge rushers you want. If your offense sucks, your team is not going to be very good. And it starts with the offensive line. That's the case in Jacksonville. That's clearly the case in Carolina. And as you pointed out, Kenny Pickett's going to roll into Carolina, and Sam Darnold's going to be the better athlete. Then what?
And then what do you do?
And then you're like, okay, just don't do athletic things around Kenny Pickett so he feels better about himself, and then it's a whole thing. So I was talking to a team the other day, Breech, that said, and they're not the Panthers, they said they would rather have Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield over Kenny Pickett at number 6.
Yeah, I don't think that is crazy. I think if you're the Panthers, you're either thinking, all right, we need to go in. Like, do you actually think any of the quarterbacks in this draft are better than Sam Darnold? Because even if you're on the fence, you can't draft them at 6 overall. You cannot draft a guy who's going to go in and look worse in training camp than Sam Darnold. And then you're back at square one, except you don't have the 6th overall pick anymore. So you look even stupider. I just don't think you can do that. I would be surprised if the Panthers, like, call up the Cardinals, say, do you want our 6th overall pick and all our first round picks for the next 2 years so we can have KAIIR Murray? Like, do something crazy. What you don't want to do.
Well, they tried to. No one was interested.
No, it's true. Try to get the shot. But what you don't want to do is draft a quarterback who is basically a lateral move from Sam Darnold. So I like this. I like getting Charles Cross in there, upgrade the offensive line. And, maybe if Sam Darnold has an extra 0.3 seconds to throw, he'll improve by 10%. So
also, as you mentioned, if you burn a 6 overall pick on a quarterback, you don't pick again until 137. So you're just sitting there all of day 2, wondering if you made a huge mistake, having buyer's remorse, and the guy hasn't even played yet. So I think you don't overthink it. Don't get cute. I know David Tepper wants to win, but you're not going to win by putting Kenny Pickett or any other quarterback out there and have them run for their lives for 3 weeks, because after that, they're going to get hurt because they're going to be running for so much. And then you have to go back to Sam Darnold anyway. All right. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll talk more perfect draft fits on the Pick Six Podcast.
This was it. We're back.
Come on, be my baby tonight.
Julie has a controversial history with many of us.
I'm not trying to mess with that lady.
My sexuality made you feel uncomfortable.
That door is open and I can leave.
I'm either with you 100% or I'm not with you at all.
You didn't apologize.
I hate you.
Why did I come back here?
The Real World Homecoming, New Orleans. Streaming April 20th exclusively on Paramount+.
Welcome back to the Pick Six Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you got to see that Real World commercial, Breech. That took me back. If you're listening on audio form, just know that you can watch Real World on Paramount+. And I'm an OG Real World fan. Like, I saw the first season in New York, watched it multiple times. Crazy time to be alive, Breech. What's your favorite Real World season?
You know what? I think the first season was like 93 or 94. I was not old enough to be watching Real
92,
World.
I believe.
Yeah, it was. I was a little too young for that. I think the first one I really remember was like Hawaii. There's a real.
Oh God, you are incredibly young, because it was New York and then LA and then San Francisco, London. I think those were the first.
Yeah, it sounds right.
4, and then Boston was in there shortly thereafter. I lived in Boston right around the time they were there. Anyway, all right, check that out on Paramount Plus if that's your jam.
We'll have our separate Ryan Wilson podcast where he breaks down each season of the Real World by episode.
Yeah,
that's after the draft. Ryan does not have time for that right now.
I may already have that podcast. I just am not publicizing it. All right, perfect draft fits part 2. Breech, you're up for, I believe, the New England Patriots.
Yeah, you know what? I think that you look at what New England has been doing this offseason. What they do, they let J.C. Jackson walk away in free agency without a care, as if they had some sort of plan in place. I'm not convinced that they did have a plan in place, because what they do, they re-signed Malcolm Butler, or signed him again after
benching him last time he was
benching him in the Super Bowl. And so one place they absolutely need help is at cornerback. And so I think there are a couple corners, you probably have a better feel for who would be available. And once you get to that 20th spot in the draft,
I think that both the names you have are exact good candidates.
Then in that case, I'm going to go with Andrew Booth to the Patriots. And I think they need someone who can come in, kind of be an instant starter. You need someone who's a little bit versatile, because Belichick loves just kind of shuffling guys around. He loves athletes. We saw that. Was that last year when they took the Division II safety, or was that 2 years ago?
2 years ago, they took Kyle Duggar or Lenore Ryan.
Kyle Duggar. And yeah, exactly. And they moved Kyle Duggar all over the place. And so what Belichick wants is athletes who can play in the secondary. And then that opens the door for him to kind of come up with these crazy game plans, against the Buccaneers and against Tom Brady, where he's just changing up the defensive formations on every play and changing everything they do. And the reason they're able to do that is because they have these super athletic guys who can kind of play anywhere on the field. So I think Andrew Booth would be a really good fit in New England.
Yeah, I love Andrew Booth out of Clemson. He actually had a really good season. He was injured for part of it, but played really well. You also had KAIIR ELAM on your list, a long, fast cornerback out of Florida, really physical in coverage, not quite so physical against the run, and that ain't going to work in New England. It was sort of a curious thing to watch. If you're physical throughout the route, it feels like you could be physical coming downhill, but he wasn't a great tackler, but that doesn't mean he can't be. But
which, by the way, is why I took KAIIR ELAM off that list and had him going to my next team, which we'll tease, but we won't talk about now because Bill Belichick is not going to cut it with somebody who can't tackle or who can't come up and be physical.
I love that you sent him to a team that doesn't value tackling cornerbacks. I can't wait to see who that is. My perfect draft fit, and I mentioned him at the top because I was reading the wrong rundown. George Karlaftis, the edge rusher out of Purdue, who could very easily be a first-round pick. I have him going 33rd at the very top of the second round to the Jaguars in that 3-round mock draft that I did on Monday. He could be 15 to 32, no problem there. I don't think he gets much higher than that. I'm talking to Scott about him a few weeks ago, and he's a really good football player, but he's not a game-changing type edge rusher. He's not particularly explosive, and that's not a bad thing. He's strong at the point of attack. He sets the edge. He's good against the run. He does a lot of the things that you want NFL edge rushers to do, but I don't think he's going to come in right away and get 10 or 11 sacks. If that's what you're looking for inside the top 15, that might be you might be disappointed. But I think if you're the Jaguars and you have a needed edge rusher, because clearly you do, we've been talking about Aiden Hutchinson for months now. If you can get an offensive tackle, whether Kwanu, whatever, Neal first overall, shore up the offensive line like you talked about earlier, Breech, and then at the top of the second round, get the edge rusher. It feels like 2 for 1 because if you swap those, you take Aiden Hutchinson at the top of the first. We talked about this on the podcast yesterday with Brinson. There's not going to be an offensive tackle there that's going to be worth that value at 33 that can come in and start right away. There's some guys there that you could take that will have the possibility to be good football players, but nothing compared to what you get from Kwanu or Neal or even Cross. So I think if you swap the order of the players in which you draft them at the positions, offensive tackle and edge rusher, you're working with something there.
Yeah, and I like that logic, and more teams should think that way because if you have 2 big needs, especially when your picks are kind of separated, you have the second pick, and then you have, or not the second pick, Jacksonville is the 33rd overall pick in the second round, and then also the first overall pick. And so if you're right there, and let's say you just mentioned it, if you take an offensive lineman in a draft where the top 5 offensive linemen might be off the board before the first round is over, and then you're stuck with like the 10th best offensive lineman with the first pick of the second round, then you're reaching, and you don't want to be reaching when you have the first pick in the second round. So I do think in that, like looking at it that way, that it makes sense for Jacksonville to go offensive lineman with the first overall pick and pass rusher with that 33rd overall pick. So
the great irony, of course, is that the Bengals passed on Penei Sewell to take Jamar Chase and then circle back to get Jackson Carman. Who
might need to be replaced this year. You know,
I was going to say he was a left tackle at Clemson. He kicked inside last year. He didn't play a ton. How many games did he start? Did he start 5 games? I don't think he started.
I mean, he got benched a couple times in one game. It was just that guard spot was just a disaster. I mean, he got better as the year went on, but again, you know why nobody noticed that? Because Jamar Chase. So if your first round pick hits and it's a home run, no one's really going on the national scene. They're not going to be roasting you for getting your second round pick wrong. But if you get the first round pick wrong and the second round pick plays well, nobody's going to be paying attention because they're going to be blasting you for messing up the first round pick. So you got to get the first round pick right, especially if you have the number 1 overall pick.
And the other, not saving grace, but the other good news for the Bengals last year is that both those picks, Jamar Chase and Jackson Carman, played on the same side of the ball. Whereas if they had taken, I don't know, who was the best defensive player last year in the draft? I can't remember. I'm so neck deep.
You got so many names in your head.
Yeah. So whoever the best defensive player was in the draft last year, if they took him in the first round and he had 18 sacks and Joe Burrow's still getting sacked a million times and they don't win a playoff game, they lose again in the first round, people are yelling and screaming about not taking Penei Sewell, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I would say maybe Micah Parsons was he the best?
Oh yeah,
player?
so yeah, that's a good one. Thank you. They take Micah Parsons. He has 12 sacks, and he's doing all sorts of things. He has 4 interceptions or whatever, and you still lose in the first round to the Raiders because Joe Burrow gets sacked 9 times.
Right?
Are you saying we should have taken Penei Sewell?
You're saying something. You're not. I mean, you're not happy with how the season turned out,
right? So I think it makes sense to have those players on the same side of the ball. That helped obviously it helped taking Jamar Chase. That helped immensely. But the fact that he was able to offset the lack of pass protection for Joe Burrow, whereas in Jacksonville, if you take offense, defense, or defense, offense, you need one of those guys to hit in a big way to overcompensate for whatever the other guy may not be able to do in year one. All right. You tease KAIIR Elam going to a team that hates tackling cornerbacks in the run game. I can't wait to hear this team. Who could it be, Breech?
Oh boy, I have KAIIR Elam going to, drum roll, the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm trying to point to my helmet there if you're watching on YouTube. There, I think my fingers there kind of, okay, good. Yeah, you know what? I just think that he is probably a better fit for the Bengals. I think the Bengals have kind of three big needs that they would think about taking in the first round. A defensive lineman, with Larry Ogunjobi not coming back. They don't really have anyone in that spot right now. That's something they need to fill. We talked about Jackson Carman, that offensive guard spot. And then obviously someone at cornerback, because, you know, you have Mike Hilton, you have Awuzie, but you kind of don't want to have to rely on Eli Apple. And I mean, he's stopgap corner. He's good enough to be in there. If they have to use him, he's fine. And so, but I think they would prefer to draft a corner here. And this is kind of what we were talking about with Jacksonville, where you look at the defensive linemen available in this draft. You know, there aren't a lot of guys that you want to be taking in the first round. So if the Bengals get to 31st overall and the highest rated guys, like the 45th best player in the draft, you know, you don't want to reach that far for a defensive lineman. So I'm not sure there's going to be anybody there to take on the defensive line. Same thing. I don't know that you want to be drafting an offensive guard there. You know, why not wait till the second round to get someone like that? So that is why I think they take Elam. And you know what? We talked about the fact that maybe a little bit trouble being physical and going up there and making those tackles on the run. But guess what? He can kind of get used to that at the NFL level. That's the good thing about having Eli Apple in there, is that Elam can kind of get his feet wet. It doesn't have to be a day one starter because they can throw Eli Apple in there, but you want him to work up and eventually be that full-time starter. So I think the Bengals are a better landing spot for Elam than the Patriots, because, you know, Belichick's want to throw him in right away. You need to be crazy right away. You need to be ready to play right away. Where with the Bengals, he'll kind of have a learning curve, and I think he'd be more successful there.
So I was asking a scout about Elam back before the Senior Bowl, I think. I said, what do you think when you see a cornerback who's physically imposing but doesn't tackle well in the run game? And he said he might not be comfortable tackling. He may not have confidence in himself. And I think if you have good coaches and you can coach him up, I think that's something you can certainly overcome. The guy's only 22 years old, or however old he is. He's going to get better. Just because you don't like things about college players doesn't mean they can't change.
You know who else doesn't like to tackle? Ryan Wilson. Deion Sanders, worked out for him.
Not too shabby. And he has a head full of hair now somehow. So it's come full circle.
The math doesn't add up.
That math does not add up.
So Brinson's guy.
It's funny you mentioned maybe not taking an interior offensive lineman there. I think Zion Johnson out of BC could be an option. He can play guard or center. I know some Bengals fans love the idea of taking center Tyler Linderbaum out of Iowa. Should he be there at 31? I had KAIIR Elam going in my latest mock draft at 31, and I had at least one Bengals fan who was apoplectic because Elam's overrated, and I don't know where they got that from, if that's their opinion or they just read it somewhere. I don't think that's the case. I think he's a first-round pick, late first, early second, worst case. And what else?
Well, and real quick, I don't think Linderbaum's going to be available at 31. I think they'd have to trade up and get him. If somehow he fell into their lap, I would absolutely
be on board with that, even though they signed Ted Harris.
But I don't think he is falling that far.
All right, well, let me give you the other two picks I had in rounds 2 and 3 for the Bengals, and you can tell me how much on a scale of 1 to 10 you hate it. So I had at 31, 31st overall, KAIIR Elam, we talked about. In the second round, I had him taking running back Isaiah Spiller. Now he is a dual threat, great catching the ball out of the backfield. Bengals fans routinely and roundly gave it a D- F+.
Yeah, I just don't think running back is a position I'm having them draft in the second round. You know what? I did a 7-round mock draft for the Bengals last week.
Oh, who'd you have going in the second round? No idea.
Georgia offensive lineman. I can't remember his name.
Schaefer or Sawyer?
Schaefer.
There you go.
Because he plays multiple positions at UGA. He played all 5 spots. and I think he'd be a guard in the NFL. That's probably where he'll end up playing. And so you have him at guard, but he also gives you depth in other spots if you need it in a pinch. And so, I think I had him taking a running back in the 6th or 7th round. So I don't hate the idea of them taking a flyer on a running back, but I feel like if you're grabbing someone in the 2nd round, doesn't count as taking a flyer, right?
So you're okay, right? Yeah. So you're okay with Mixon full load and then Evans being the backup. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like they have
okay with
right
that
in
too.
there. Like they
I'm just
love.
checking.
They give Mixon's not out. Mixon is good enough to be. He's one of the best running backs in the NFL. He puts
but I
up
worry about
monstrous numbers every
the
year.
mileage.
There's definitely some durability issues. He gets banged up a lot, but I'm not looking to get another guy in there in the 2nd round. You have Mixon under contract for 3 more years through 2024. So yeah, I probably wouldn't do the 2nd round.
Fair enough. All right, and then finally, I had him picking Josh Jobe, cornerback out of Alabama, in round 3. So you get 2 cornerbacks sandwiched around that pick that everyone hates.
Yeah, I think they need a corner in your mock draft. You have them getting 2 corners. So I am not going to complain with that. I don't know a lot about Jobe, but if you can
played at Alabama, played against SEC guys every week. He's a pretty good football player.
You have him taking 2 SEC corners. You just want to turn the Bengals in the SEC.
3 SEC
Burrow
players
and Chase on offense, and you have 3 SEC players going to them in your mock draft. But again, if you can shore up the backside of the defense, if you're the Bengals, then you feel really good about your chances of winning division next year and maybe getting back to the Super Bowl.
It's Jesse Clark notes in the chat. He's half kidding, but also half serious. No point for the Bengals to draft a running back when Zach Taylor's going to use Samaje Perine for everything.
I mean, we all saw the freaking Super Bowl when Joe Mixon wasn't even out there for that final play or any of those key plays on that final drive. But
and Seymour makes a valid point. Bengals should trade up, take Jordan Davis, the 341-pound nose tackle for Georgia, and play him at corner instead of Eli Apple.
And don't forget Jalen LeGrant saying, you know what, the Bengals just need to draft a head coach.
There you go. The dude went to the Super Bowl. What are we doing? I love the fact that he's still there as a Steelers fan. All right. Who is my perfect draft fit, you may ask, for round 3? Going with Jameson Williams to the Saints. The Saints, no one has any idea what they're doing. They're at pick 16 and 19 now. They traded up with Debo's Eagles and gave them a king's ransom to move up a couple spots. And no, it's unclear what their plan is going to be. Conventional wisdom would say maybe they'll package those picks for a quarterback, but Breech, I think we've talked about this with all 3 of us. You actually brought it up, I believe. They're the team that traded back into the 1st round a few years ago to take Marcus Davenport, not Lamar Jackson. So who has any idea what
you have them taking quarterback with their first round pick, right?
Yeah. So I have them taking at pick 16, Matt Corral, who is my QB1. And as I said on HQ the other day, I'm going to start pumping up Matt Corral more because I've been sort of just going by what I think teams might do, and Corral probably falls to the 2nd round. I know that a couple teams like him, but this quarterback class is so average that I think it just varies depending on who you're talking to. But
draft odds are going to blow this up in your face. You didn't pump up Mac Jones enough last year.
Yeah.
Even though you were 100% correct, you're going to go all in on this Corral thing, and he's going to be a bust.
Well, it's only 2 weeks left. I haven't gone all in yet. I've been sort of lukewarm about all the quarterbacks, but I'm gonna have him going 16. So I'm gonna PR him up a little better than I have been. So I have him going, and I think he makes sense in New Orleans because Sean Payton's obviously gone, but Pete Carmichael's still calling the plays, and that offense I would imagine remains very similar. If you love Taysom Hill and you talk yourself into that, Matt Corral seems like a layup because he's actually a quarterback who does all the things Taysom Hill does, but does them all better, and he's 8 years younger. So that's the thinking there. But then Jameson Williams, the wide receiver that I mentioned, is my perfect draft fit. I have him going 19. And the reality is, Breech, he may not be there at 19, even though he suffered that ACL in the championship game in January, the national title game against Georgia. He's wide receiver 1. And I think most people agree with that. Had he been 100%, Garrett Wilson's now my wide receiver 1. I think they're pretty close. It is ironic that Jameson Williams had to leave Ohio State to get playing time at Alabama, but here we are. And I think, when's the last thing we heard from Mike Thomas? Like, do we know what's going on with Mike Thomas?
Yeah, I don't think he wants to be in New Orleans.
Well, how come nothing's moved on that? I feel like he would be a top
well, they just
trade
got a new coach, so
But we haven't heard a peep. Usually, even when guys aren't doing it, like Aaron Rodgers, we got updates on Aaron Rodgers, even though many of them may not have been
the
close to
last
true.
thing we heard on that whole situation was at the combine.
What did we hear?
And Mickey Loomis said, We fully expect to have Michael Thomas back, and we expect him to be healthy.
Did
So
he say that before or
apparently,
after? Did he say that before or after Pete Carroll said that we are not trading Russell Wilson?
it's a good question. He said it before they made all these trades to trade up in the draft.
So, okay, let me ask you, if you're trading 2 or 3 farms to get from 18 to 16 and 19, or wherever they did there, what 2 things are you targeting?
I'm not targeting a quarterback. I think I said that one time. I can't remember if it was on the podcast or if I was just talking to myself, but like, I just don't think this is the draft where you're mortgaging your future to try and get a quarterback. I like the idea of a receiver. I think that Jameson Williams, like you said, if he doesn't tear his ACL, he's a top 10 pick. And so because of that injury, he might fall into your lap at 19th overall, and that's a fantastic pick. But if you take a quarterback, here's the thing. You're the Saints. You just signed Jameis Winston. Not that like he's your franchise quarterback for the next 10 years. You just signed Andy Dalton in case Jameis Winston's not ready for week 1. So there's no reason to sign 2 veteran quarterbacks if your plan is to then draft another quarterback. And now you have 3 quarterbacks on your roster when, is Matt Corral just going to be able to blow away Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton?
You had to get Andy Dalton there. Yes, no to Jameis, yes to Andy.
I just think that.
No, that's a fair point because Jameis is, I think, the 2-year deal. He was playing his best football last year before he tore his ACL right around Halloween. I think he's going to be fine when he bounces back. He knows the system. The system's not changing. Just Sean Payton's not going to be there. I think that's fair. But then why do you trade up?
Why do you trade up? Like, why did they pull the extra 2nd-round pick?
If you're fine with Jameis.
First-round pick?
Yeah.
I think to do something like this. I mean, like you said, this is the team that drafted Marcus Davenport. Everybody thought they were trying to get a quarterback.
But here's the other thing, Breech. You're not getting an offensive tackle at 16 that's going to be the top 3 guys. After top 3, it drops off a little bit, and then you're sort of rolling the dice.
What if you're packaging your first-round picks together to get a tackle?
So it's going to end up being 3 first-round picks because the one you had to give away next year to the Eagles or the year after, whenever that is, and a 2nd-round pick too. I think is part of there. Something crazy to go up to. Now, if you're going to get one of the big 3, that's one thing. But if you have to settle, quote unquote, settle for whoever number 4 is for you, Trevor Penning, Tyler Smith, whomever. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think they go with a receiver, and then
what?
I mean, what if they just take 2 receivers?
That would be hilarious. That would be insane to give up everything they gave up. They gave up to take 2 receivers in a class that's deep enough where you get one in the 1st round and get one in the 2nd round.
Maybe you take a defensive tackle.
You could, but again, I mean, maybe take Jordan Davis.
He's available. I don't hate that.
I guess, but again, you have to think about all the stuff you gave up. I don't know. But I do like Jameson Williams because Loomis might think he's coming back. Thomas may have different ideas of that. There's not much depth after that. And I think you give Jameis Winston a player like Jameson Williams and then with newly minted tight end Taysom Hill, Alvin Kamara, I would imagine, is coming back. We haven't heard anything about that. I also had them taking Luke Gedeke in the 2nd round, who's the offensive tackle of Central Michigan, plays on the right side opposite Bernard Raymond, who we've talked a lot about as a left tackle. And then I had him taking running back Dameon Pierce in the 3rd round, at the end of the 3rd round. I think it's a comp pick. So just as insurance against Alvin Kamara, whatever, if he has any legal repercussions from his offseason, or just to spell him in much the same way I was thinking about Isaiah Spiller and Joe Mixon in Cincinnati. So that's where I'm at on that. No, go ahead.
Saints are going to be one of the most exciting teams to watch in the draft just because I don't feel like we have any idea what they're going to do. I think their hope is that an offensive lineman somehow falls in their lap and that Jameis Williams falls in their laps.
So given that there are no quarterbacks worth drafting in the top 10, how many trades do you predict will take place among the top 10 picks?
Because there's not going to be a lot of demand to move up there.
Unless it's for the Saints and offensive tackle or the Packers or Chiefs for a wide receiver. I think that's the starting point. Or maybe if someone loves Kayvon Thibodeau and he slips to 6 or 7 or something.
I say the over-under is 1.5.
That's a good number. Like I want to say under, but you don't know what these crazy folks are thinking that are desperate.
You know, some people think crazy, and then we don't get crazy at all. And then it's just a yawner.
Mhm. All right, 1.5 is also the number of quarterbacks taken in the top 10. Where are you going there?
I think Detroit's a wild card. I think they,
I don't think they're taking a quarterback.
Dan Campbell's out here blowing smoke, saying they don't need a quarterback. It's smokescreen season, Wilson. You know all about smokescreen season. You're the draft guy. You should have smoke coming out of your background at all times during.
I don't think they're taking a quarterback at 2. They have 32 as well. Then I think they have 34. Let's see. They have 34. 2, 32, 34, 66.
What's the over under on quarterbacks? You said
1.5, the same as over under on trades as you said it.
I'll say over. I think it's 2.
I don't know. It's gonna that's how crazy it is. Like
I just think because you have the Panthers, the Falcons, the Seahawks. Oh, no, the Seahawks. Yeah, Seahawks.
Yeah, they're at 9.
Confused because they traded. Yeah, they're at 9. So you have Falcons, Panthers, Seahawks, and I think 2 of those 3 take a quarterback.
And then Washington's at 11, Minnesota's at 12, Houston's at 13. I don't think they'll take one because of things like Davis Mills is their guy. So even through 12, you could perhaps see a quarterback taken. I don't think Washington does it because all that smoke screening with Carson Wentz, and then Minnesota did draft Kellen Mond last year. I'm not sure what they're on him. All right, I think that's it, Breech. We got 41 minutes out of that thing. We're 19 minutes early from a typical Brinsonian podcast.
I was going to say if Brinson was here, we would have another at least hour. This thing would easily hit an hour.
We'd still be talking about golf and his trip to Asheville last weekend.
He went to Asheville.
That is he did.
What if Brinson's just avoiding me? I feel like I haven't done a podcast with him in 3 months.
That could be a very real possibility.
What?
Have you been to Asheville?
I have not.
Oh, it's 6 hours from your house, I believe. Is that right?
Spoiler alert! Don't ruin it for me. I'm thinking about going there. I might.
It's a great town.
I actually planned to move to Asheville, but my directions got mixed up, and I ended up in Nashville. So I just stayed here.
Yeah,
that was the plan.
Yep. Instead of 6 hours from Clay Travis, you're 6 minutes from Clay Travis. Joke's on you. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this draft edition of the Pick Six Podcast. We'll be back tomorrow. Mr. Brinson should be back then as well. And in the meantime, I think Breech and I'll be back on Friday for a Monday podcast, a mailbag podcast. So just come back, talking more draft, talking more NFL. See you guys later.